Okay, let's kick things off. So hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from around the world. My name is Ernie Collins. I'm a senior product manager at Partnerize. And today I'm going to be talking to you, or we're going to be talking to you about third-party cookie deprecation and how it will affect your partner marketing. I'm joined by two very special guests. First and foremost by Steve from Moonpool, and those who are eagle-eyed amongst you will notice that April looks slightly different today, and that's because she's not actually joining us. She had to pull out, unfortunately, but we do have the wonderful Sam joining us from Buy a Gift instead. So hello to you both.
Thank you.
Right, so in terms of what you'll learn today, what you'll walk away with, so we're going to kick things off. Unfortunately, you're going to have to listen to me for the next 10 to 15 minutes, but I'll walk you through an overview of some of the browser changes in the industry and how it will impact you. We're then going to look at some action items for how you can go about future-proofing your partnership channel tracking, and also how, crucially, you can start to save some of those marketing dollars. And then we'll open it up to our industry experts, Steve and Sam, and we'll have a roundtable where we'll do a bit of a Q&A. This is also where you'll have an opportunity of asking your questions to us. And if you want to do so, please feel free to use the Q&A button or Q&A feature on Zoom. We'll collect the questions, and at the end, we'll have the opportunity of asking our experts. Right, so just to kick things off and give us a bit of background and context into this space, I'm just going to kick things off with talking to you about what is a cookie. So a lot of people get scared when we start talking about cookies. It starts to get technical, so I'm going to try and break it down and make it very easy for us to understand. So first and foremost, a web cookie is just a bit of information that is stored across different browser sessions. So when you're on the internet using Chrome or Safari, for instance, you're able, or those browsers are able to store information about you as you surf the web. And there's two different types of cookies. There are first-party cookies, and these are stored by the owner of the website that you're visiting. So for instance, if you're going to buy a gift, they will have their own cookies that will be dropped on you when you're on their site. And these are primarily used for analytical purposes by the owner of them to remember settings and improve user experience. The easiest kind of most tangible example of this is whenever you go online and you have usernames or passwords to remember, you can opt for the website to actually remember them for you. And that's leveraging a first-party cookie. So it's making your experience a lot better. Then we have third-party cookies, and these are created by other websites and deposited or used across different websites as you track or as you surf the web. So a good example here is if you're going to buy a gift or go to BBC, The Guardian, or whatever, then you may have different cookies that are stored across your session. They're sometimes called cross-site cookies as well. And they're very much used for cross-site targeting, retargeting, or ad serving. And really, third-party cookies have been the bedrock of the ad and marketing digital industry over the last 20 to 30 years. They've been a real mainstay in this space. And we're later on going to talk about the deprecation of them and why that's important for you to kind of understand. So that's what a cookie is. In terms of how does this relate to different browsers that you or your users may experience. So there's three kind of main browsers. To be honest, there's one big one and then two slightly smaller ones. But we'll start with the smallest, which is Firefox. So Firefox implemented this thing called total cookie protection. And essentially what that means is it limits cookies to first-party cookies and blocks third-party cookies. Now, there are some edge cases and some exceptions to third-party cookies, but for the vast majority of them, they are blocked, and therefore they're not allowed on Firefox. Firefox also sometimes call them cross-site cookies. It's worth mentioning that Firefox accounts for a very small proportion of the browser market share, but it's still relevant when talking about this space. Next up, we have Google Chrome. So Google Chrome accounts for somewhere in the region of 65 to 70% of the market share of browsers. It's by far and away the most dominant browser that our users use today. And I'm sure many of you will use Google Chrome. Now, Google Chrome actually currently to this day accepts first and third-party cookies. It did release a statement to say that it would deprecate third-party cookies in 2022. It then pushed it back to 2023, and now it's pushed it back to 2024. So to this day, it still uses them. However, the deprecation of them is pending, and whether they postpone it again or whether it happens in 2024, I'm very confident that it will eventually happen. And then finally, we have Safari. So Safari talk about this in relation to ITP, or intelligence tracking protection. And what that means is that with Safari, similarly to Firefox, they block third-party cookies. And they also have some limits on first-party cookies in local storage in terms of the time frame by which they're allowed. So hopefully that's clear in terms of what a cookie is and some of the different browsers. What I'm going to do now is just focus on Safari for one, because actually it's been in the news recently as well. So in terms of its kind of global market share across all kind of browser usage, it represents about 10%. So it's much, much lower than Google Chrome. However, it's still not insignificant in terms of its market share. And that slightly over-indexes when you look at mobile browser market share. So it's around 25% for that. And that's largely to do with the fact that Apple iPhones are so popular. And on an iPhone, as those of you who own an iPhone will know, it is the default browser. Okay, so how does this affect you? So I'm just going to show you this chart here on the right. This was done by the IAB, and it's looking at the types of methods used to track affiliate or partner marketing activity. And just before anyone spots anything to do with the maths here, this was a multi-choice question. So they were able to answer a few different options, which is why the percentages don't add up to 100. But I think the key takeaway here is that we still have around half of tracking done using a third-party cookie. And as we've just learned, third-party cookies are not being used by Safari and Firefox, and they will soon no longer be used by Chrome. And we also have 20% of activity or tracking activity where marketers do not know what they're using. So we have what I would say a significant volume of tracking activity that is at risk from third-party cookies. And I think there's two important points here. The first is that currently those using third-party cookies are losing revenue, because if users are using Safari and Firefox, and we do know that 10% globally do use them, and through mobile, and mobile is increasing in terms of usage, we do know that that revenue will be affected. So immediately today, if you're using a third-party cookie, you're at risk of losing revenue. And secondly, very importantly, we've just also learned that Google are going to deprecate their third-party cookies in 2024, and that accounts for a very large proportion of browser activity. So there are two really important points here, and really why we're having this conversation today, to help you understand kind of what you're using, and also help you with methods of being able to mitigate third-party cookie use and move to a more resilient way of tracking. And I guess, why is it so important for us to be able to track accurately? So I think the first really important point is around the attribution of sales to the affiliate channel. And I think it's worth taking a step back here and really understanding the benefits, if you like, of digital. Digital is a fantastic channel to be able to do advertising and marketing. Because of the technology that we're able to leverage from it, you're able to track users across the internet and really track attribution of where your sales are coming from. It can be a very transparent channel. And if you look at other channels like TV or out of home or print, it's very hard to be able to do that. You know, if a user sees a TV ad, it's very difficult then to track that that user to the sale. But with digital advertising and indeed with partner marketing, it's very easy to be able to look at return on investment of such activity through digital. It's a wonderful channel to be able to do that with. And second to that, and linked to that, not only are you able to see where your marketing dollars are being driven from in terms of whether it's partner marketing, but then actually see which partners, and you're able to see the volume and credit them appropriately. So you'll be able to build a whole strategy around, you know, which partners are driving your sales for any given category, time of year, season, etc. And you can credit them appropriately. And then finally, linked to those 2 points, it's around telling a good story, a precise story around how your marketing is working or not working. And having consistent tracking across the board helps with that, because as soon as you start to have gaps, then you start to not only have inconsistent tracking, but also an inconsistent story to tell, which may actually tell the wrong story, because you may end up seeing that you're over-indexing in certain areas and under-indexing in other areas, and that might not be due to the performance, but it might be due to the lack of tracking, and that might be due to the use of third-party cookies. I can see a question in the chat. It's great that people are asking questions. We will come to those at the end, so please keep firing them across. So just a slide on Partnerize in terms of what we can do to get around third-party cookies. I won't dwell on this too much, but just to say that there are methods around this, and I know that a number of different partner marketing technology platforms have solutions to get around third-party cookies. So we have quite a few. We've got the Partnerize tag, which is a super easy way of implementing tracking. Simply by dropping a tag on your brand's website, you're immediately able to leverage a different way of tracking without using third-party cookies and actually using first-party cookies and local storage. We also allow you to use any kind of tag management tools that you might have, or e-commerce platform extensions. Both of those use our tag, and we simply piggyback off the back of these tag management tools such as GTM or some of these e-commerce extensions like Magento or Shopify. And then we also have server-to-server tracking method, which is a bit more sophisticated in terms of the setup, but also helps get around the third-party cookie issue. It has its pros and cons, as do the others. I won't go into the details of those in this webinar, but the key thing about all four is that they do mitigate the risk of third-party cookies because they don't rely on them. And I think, as I mentioned, Apple have been in the news recently, and I know that there's been a lot of kind of chat in the industry about this upcoming release. So just to kind of give it a shout out and to explain kind of what the release is. So Apple are making a release to browsing across laptops, across tablets and mobile devices, so across all Apple devices. iOS 17 is the name of the operating system for mobile specifically, but they have the equivalent for laptops and tablets. And what Apple are doing with this release is they are stripping out some of the tracking parameters that are used when browsing Safari in privacy mode or incognito mode. Now, they've released what those tracking parameters are. We've reviewed that list. We've done some significant testing to see how it would affect Partnerize. And As of today, we can confirm that it doesn't affect any of the Partnerize tracking, or nor does it affect any of the tracking parameters that Partnerize uses. Now, that is the case today. This may change in future releases as Safari develops this. It's certainly in line with their ethos, if you like, to continue to be more stringent on these privacy laws. But as of now, nothing is affected. We are, of course, closely monitoring the situation. We are, of course, also evolving our tracking to future-proof it against any risk that this may pose in the future too. So we are doing everything we can in this place to ensure that tracking is unaffected. And speaking of making sure tracking is unaffected, I will steal a bit of Steve's intro here and talk about Moonpool. So Partnerize has been partnering with Moonpool to look at tracking integrity, to ensure that tracking performance is resilient, to ensure that there are no issues, to ensure that we understand what tracking methods are being used by our brands, looking at third-party cookies versus first-party cookies, for instance. So we've been working with Moonpool over the last year or so to ensure our tracking remains resilient, and that brands can continue to operate in a world where third parties are currently deprecated and will continue to be deprecated when Google eventually does its thing in 2024. So I'm sure everyone is sick and tired of my voice, which is good because we are now going to invite my industry experts back to join us. So we do have, we'll kick off with Sam. We've got Sam Coleman from Buy a Gift. Sam, why don't you just give a few words, just introduce yourself to everyone.
Yeah, afternoon, guys. My name's Sam. I'm the affiliate marketing manager for Buy a Gift and Roulette Days, and been working at the company about 5 years, and been in the industry for maybe about just under 9 now or so.
Excellent. And we've also got Steve Brown from Moonpool, the chief exec.
So hi, everybody. Yeah, so I'm chief exec for Moonpool. Moonpool's been going for about 2 years. As Ernie said kindly earlier on, what we're doing is helping understand tracking efficiency for networks, for publishers, for advertisers.
Excellent. So you've noticed now I've stopped sharing my screen. We're going to enter into a bit of a Q&A. I've stopped sharing my screen so you can see our wonderful faces. So we're going to stay with you, Steve, and you're going to kick things off. So you've effectively built a whole business around ensuring persistent tracking for brands. What do you think are the biggest challenges brands are facing that you're able to help with?
So we're coming into the second half of 2023. And as you mentioned, in the second half of 2024, Chrome is going to follow Safari in deprecating third-party cookies. And that is going to shine a light on actually what happens on Safari at the moment, but will happen on Chrome in the future, which is that only first-party tracking will work. So the issues that we're helping brands with at the moment are having a very good first-party implementation and understanding the issues of having to move away from third-party. And there is one thing there that most networks that Partnerize, they work different tracking methods at the same time. So sometimes people don't realize that their first party implementation might not be working on certain deep links because on Chrome, the third party implementation is operative. So I think that's one of the things that brands really need to be aware of.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, actually, just to say that, just because you've, switched over your tracking and the majority of your tracking is using first-party cookies, it might be that some is still using third-party cookies or falling back to third-party cookies. And therefore, it's not, in my opinion, a case of just flicking a switch and just leaving it. But I guess what you're saying, constantly monitor it and ensure that you're not losing any kind of marketing dollars to it.
Yeah, very much.
Sam, from your side, your team did implement a future-proof tracking solution to accurately measure and attribute partnership marketing. What are some of the, I guess, best practices that you have in place to ensure tracking does remain consistent?
Yeah, I think probably one of the easiest things to talk about is it's obviously, as you said early on, it's not the most easy thing to sort of set up, or it's not the easiest subject to kind of sink your teeth into. So what it kind of forced us into doing was having quite high level conversations across the whole company, whether that be looping in senior leadership all the way through to different teams, the tech team, to actually set up the implementation of it. So what that's probably helped us do is identify when problems do arise. We have more eyes on the project as a whole. So it's allowed us to make sure that our tracking does remain consistent. It means that when we are planning, when we're budgeting, when we're trying to future-proof our program anyway, we can be confident that it's built from the ground up to actually support and make sure we're paying all of our affiliates and our customers in the right way as best as possible.
Yeah, and I think what you say there about working with your tech team is, resonates very well with me, because you see that the best examples, I think, of working with brands where they do see this work is that close relationship between the marketing manager, the affiliate marketing manager, and the tech team working hand in hand to ensure tracking works effectively. So Steve, in terms of collaboration, like taking a step back, in terms of collaboration and industry-wide initiatives, what steps do you think brands and partners as well need to take to ensure an effective performance marketing tracking in this privacy-conscious environment that we live in today?
I think people need to talk with each other. So you've just outlined BuyGift, where you've got multiple people talking with each other within the company. That is really important. People within the company need to understand affiliate marketing. Within an advertiser, you've got challenges of they want the affiliate marketing to work, they want the paid search to work. The advertiser itself has got to understand actually how they get working symbiotically. And we often see that tracking is as much an art as a science. And we can see Sam smiling in that's really important to get the tech team involved, because actually every business has its nuances, and that's where it's an art. And if it's achieved well, then the next stage is people can talk about actually how the partnership should build. So underpinning that is everyone having an understanding of tracking and not shying away from it, because it isn't actually that hard once you get your head around it to understand the fundamental building blocks of tracking. And once people do, and they talk about it, and they can then talk about the opportunities that come from having confidence that publishers are going to be fairly rewarded for the sales they send.
Sam, I'm curious just to jump in here. We've spoken about working with tech teams and the importance of it. I suppose to brands listening to us on the call, I think, okay, that's all well and good, but how do I do that? So I don't know if you're able to maybe go into a bit more detail, some tips on how to work well with your tech team.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be honest, we kind of got this started because we were having issues where there was a mismatch between what we were seeing in Partner Eyes and some of our internal reports. So what we needed to do was just really resync it. So I completely agree with what Steve's saying about saying it is an art to actually have everything fluidly working together. So I think it was more a conversation from a pain point, if you like, where we were trying to communicate numbers that weren't being resonated within the rest of the business. So that was almost where those conversations started. So it almost just started from a very basic educational piece of this is what we need to do. This is the bare basics of what it looks like. What's the simplest solution to get this to work? And then you can slowly add those layers into it. And I think we'll probably come into it later down the line with, say, like attribution models and those kind of things. But even just for the core fundamentals of last click wins or how you're going to reward your partners, it's just saying this is why we need to be rewarding XYZ partner because of the activity that's gone on. What's the best way to kind of cause that outcome? What's the way to make sure it's correct? What's the best way to make sure you understand what we're doing? So it's just been that almost like little and often conversation, very bare bones, the basic of what affiliate marketing can be, what kind of journey we need consumers to go through. So that's probably the most basic and easiest advice I can give with trying to set it up. and patience with it all, isn't it? Just because it sounds convoluted, it sounds difficult to start, but once you're going to get your head around it, it is simple to integrate, and normally the tech teams know what they're talking about with server integrations. It's just how do they relate that back to what we're trying to get in passing that information back to partners.
Yeah, that resonates a lot with me as well. As a product manager, you know, you when working with engineers, you always want to kind of educate them on the problem at hand and explain to them the pain points, and then let them, you know, the more context they have, the easier it is for them to come up with a solution. So, you know, what you said really does resonate with me too.
And actually, engineers are human. You say the more context they can have. The worst problem in a world to take to someone is, I think there's a problem with this. Can you take a look at it? You know, no one likes that, whatever walk of life you're in. So, you know, if an affiliate manager thinks that something's not tracking, it's actually saying, you know what, I think the tracking on that offer we put live yesterday that is on this URL is not tracking. Can you take a look at it? The developer's far more likely to have their interest piqued and then perhaps come back with a, you know what, you were right, as opposed to actually just putting something at the bottom of the pile because they don't really know how to approach a question like, can you just check the tracking? So
absolutely,
help your developers, help you.
So just changing tact a little bit now, talking about the actual methods. So Sam, you've implemented server-to-server tracking. What benefits have you realized from this versus other implementations? And were there any tactics or approaches that you've been able to leverage first-party data for performance marketing? And I think we may have touched on some of these in the presentation already, but interested to hear your kind of take on it.
Yeah, it's a good question, because I think with the biggest thing is it's just confidence in what's going on. Like one say that there's no breakages. So that's quite nice. That definitely makes my life and the developer's life a hell of a lot easier. But I think what it kind of does is it installs that trust. So it's allowed us to kind of be very strategic with our approach of, obviously sitting on the brand side, we have our OKRs, we have our objectives of driving additional revenue, what kind of growth it is, etc., etc. We all know what those kind of conversations are. But our approach can now be affiliate first, if you like. So rather than trying to go down the line of attribution models or how we should be rewarding partners, it's allowed us, by having the confidence in the tracking, is we can go, no, we need to make sure we're rewarding our affiliates correctly first, whether that is the point of sale, it's last touch, or whether it's first touch. We now have confidence in the tracking to actually start to enable more conversations coming from it. I think it helps with affiliate partners as well, because the last thing you want to do working as an affiliate is not get paid for the good work that you're putting in for it, or not being rewarded correctly for it. So it's definitely allowed us to build that strong stability to actually start to build off of and start to come up with different new ideas. I think attribution is one it's been talked about a lot, hasn't it? But I think I'm yet to see many strong examples of it within the affiliate industry itself just yet. I think this kind of structure, by having the trust in it, being able to go away from the regulations that are coming in place when we have the third-party cookie issues coming up, it will allow us to kind of take that strong first step, if you like, and actually start seeing what success can look like within those ideas, and then start to relay those kind of conversations back and have ideas with affiliates about how it can work. But having the server gives us the trust to actually do it from both sides.
Yeah, and I suppose once you start that conversation with your tech teams around ensuring that the tracking is future-proof, if there are any other further updates to be done, then it's an easier conversation, I suppose, to then go to them and say, hey, we need to make further updates, versus going to them kind of fresh and saying, okay, now we need to change everything. So I suppose there is that element too. Steve, curious from your side, in terms of cashback or loyalty points, we obviously have some big partners in that space. Consumers do expect to receive cashback and points when checking out through a loyalty partner. And if brands are unable to deliver on the rules due to cookie-related tracking issues, would the consumer be aware of this? And what are the challenges that brands face for consumers inquiring for their cashback? Because this could happen at scale, right? If we're looking at Safari particularly, and users that use a mobile phone, 25% we've just learned. So this kind of thing could happen at scale. So how do brands go about dealing with it?
It can absolutely happen at scale. And I think one of the things is the bigger cashback sites, they are brands in their own right. So no one goes to the large cashback site thinking, who are their suppliers for me getting my cashback? So it is the cashback site that's reputation is hindered if tracking doesn't work. And you touch on the Safari audience, that it's really important that actually some of the tracking issues the industry faces today are nothing to do with the industry. They're to do with the environment in which the industry operates. And so the cashback site has to work with its audience to educate them as to what is required to get the cashback tracking. And I think from the knock on to what an advertiser is, that if you work at a cashback site, a user may lose 50p or 50 cents. Actually, the admin costs with following that up could be 10 times that. Then the network has an admin cost, the advertiser has an admin cost. And there comes a point where the cashback site is going to look at what's the reputational risk of the compromised tracking. Will I promote that advertiser or not? And I think that that's the challenge that the industry is facing, and that there's little snippets of that at the moment in the fact that third parties been deprecated on Safari. And I think there's a year now to deprecation on Chrome for people to understand that actually you've really got to fix it to help the cashback sites deliver a really good quality service to their users in a year's time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just following on from, I suppose, a publisher angle, Sam, from your perspective, have you seen any changes in publisher behavior or engagement as a result of the deprecation, and how have you adapted your marketing strategies? Have you been more proactive in telling partners that your third-party cookie resilient, for instance, with your server-to-server integration, or have you changed anything, since you changed?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily sort of glassing it around, but I think because we've got quite an old program, we've been in the industry for a good while, we're fairly good relations with our partners. So if there were tracking issues, we're quite fluent with it. And I think they can tell when there hasn't been anything like that going on for a while. But I think going back to Steve's point, actually, about cashback and attribution, I think that's where we can really see that strength. And I think what you really find, especially when talking with cashback, I think one of the coolest things we get to do as affiliate marketers is, and one of the conversations we have to have internally quite a lot, is we're not talking to, in my example, buy gift customers. We're talking to cashback customers who might not even know who our brands are. So what we want to do is making sure that we're enabling the best possible journey for them when they engage through cashback to come through to buy a gift or letter days. So we're trying to speak to these different audiences, which allows us to come up with fun, creative ways of actually planning campaigns or getting different things. So again, that's almost where that solidarity comes from. So when we have that strong tracking, we know we're not going to get TQs for unnecessary reasons because of tracking complaints, because of issues, because of the admin time that it comes. It does allow us to be more creative with our campaigns and spend the time with our partners to come up with interesting ways to collaborate, to create new campaigns to attract different types of customers to the brand, rather than just our stereotypical experienced day consumer. So it's definitely, again, that confidence from both parties that we can service the customer in the right way possible.
So you're talking about you helping your publishers because you're coming up with the creativity. I think you've also got publishers who they might spend a day writing a page of content and then put some links onto that piece of content. I think part of the world the channel is going into is there is a responsibility of everyone to take ownership of the problem. It shouldn't be delegated to the advertiser. So it's great you talk about server to server. It shouldn't be delegated to the network, but everyone should take a little bit of responsibility. So if a publisher has put in a day's work and they're going to put some links onto an article, there's a responsibility, like any professional business, to audit their supply chain. And especially if it's a deep link to a new product, I think in my mind, there's a responsibility for the publisher to say, you know what, I've just spent a day of my time. I should check this link before I promote it to make sure that I'm going to earn the commission on it. And the same goes with the voucher code site, that they're just about to send 10,000 clicks to an offer. surely you should check that it's going to work successfully down the line, and share the responsibility with your advertiser, your network, with your agency, for actually everyone having an easy model that works successfully.
It's a good way to put it, actually. That I was going to say, it's just like checking, you know, for Black Friday, any discount codes out there, you're going to check them first, aren't you? Because you don't want that code not to work, get angry customers for it not working. It's the equivalent. We're checking the code, the publisher's checking the code, and it's all working. So that's almost what we're trying to do. It's just doing that within the wider context of all of our partners in that one foul swoop.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I do have loads more questions that we've pre-prepared, but I think it's time to put these guys on the spot. I'm just going to jump into the Q&A now and just take some of your questions. So the first one, which is open to either of you. So on the IAB slide that I talked about earlier, it seems that most marketers are still relying on third-party tracking despite the ongoing changes. Why do you think this is the case, despite there being so much conversation around the topic? Is it a fear of getting started? Is it because it's out of their wheelhouse? Or is it a bit of, you know, it's not my responsibility?
I actually think there's another one, which is some advertisers, I suspect, don't realize that they have first-party tracking enabled. And so they think that they've got more reliance on third party than they actually have. So I think, in my mind, that's a contributor to the data that we saw. But after that, when we talk to advertisers, publishers, I think there's a lack of understanding really about the tracking that is implemented, a lack of understanding about the types of tracking. And therefore, there's, I think, with an education piece around tracking, of which this webinar is one, people will go and ask their tech team, what tracking do we have? Or they'll go and understand that actually we're tracking through JavaScript. So that therefore sets a first-party cookie. So we've got first-party tracking enabled. So I think there's a number of reasons that underpin it. And part of it is an education. It's a talking about tracking. And I also think there is sometimes there has been a lag in some advertisers of putting in place first-party tracking. But I don't think it's as big as those numbers suggested.
Sam, any builds on that? So it sounds like education is the biggest thing for you, Steve. Sam, what about your point of view?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think education is probably, it's the easiest one to probably point your finger up and say that that's where this is going on. I think that's why these kind of sessions are so important, because you can actually see and hopefully get more of a layman's terms of what tracking is, because that's where you kind of start to develop an understanding of it. But I also think in sort of maybe even the current circumstances that we're in, where we're having a cost of living crisis, we're having all these issues, it's almost, I think, internal pressures that we're seeing from just a general consumer behavior. It means that we're looking for short-term answers, right? Are we looking for what kind of campaign works quickly, what we're trying to do? So we're trying to get the answers here and now. Whilst when we say tracking, first party at the moment and third party, it's working at the moment. It's not obviously broken as of yet. So that's why I think there's not a force. You've not had a kick up the arse to say that it needs to happen here and now. So I think there is that kind of approach. I like to say to my team, it's been Q4 since August, and it's just been non-stop, because there's that consistent trying to look for short-term answers of what's happened, what's going wrong with performance kind of thing. And I think that's something whenever we speak with our partners, even with affiliates, it's the same kind of conversations that's going on. So I think tracking is a long-term problem that needs to be fixed as soon as possible, and it's something that you want that stability with. So that's why I'm damn glad that it's done for us, and future proof there. But I definitely do think it is seen as a long-term problem that can come tomorrow, but tomorrow is always coming fairly quickly, right?
Yeah.
But you're a good example of someone who's taken the effort to get the tracking implementation reliable. And you're reaping the benefits of it. And I think that, you know, that's a good story.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why I think these kind of conversations here are great to have. I don't see many tracking questions that have come up at other events and this kind of thing. So it's good just to even start having conversations about it, right? Where we have it, it's not your typical affiliate pub conversation over a couple of beers. It's more campaign planning or CPA rates, that kind of a thing. So I think it's important that we're now starting to have these conversations rather than the doom and gloom of you've got a deadline, here's where it needs to be done by. So just by, like you say, having these kind of roundtables, having these conversations, having the Q&As is brilliant. It's a really good first step for it, just to layman's it down, make sure it's simplistic, make sure it is just understandable, bite-sized chunks.
Yeah, it's definitely not the sexiest topic, isn't it, in terms of what you can talk about. And I always think about it in terms of responsibility across the platform. You know, I look after tracking at Partnerize, and it's by far and away not the sexiest thing to shout about in terms of product releases, but it's so integral to everything that Partnerize does. It's the bedrock of the business, and everything is built on top of it. So just like it is a Partnerize, it's also the bedrock of everything that you do from the brand side. So it is so important. There was just a follow-up question just on that, and maybe I can direct that to you, Steve. Why would merchants be using first-party and third-party cookies at the same time?
I think the aim is to track what by whatever means possible. So the third-party tracking still works. So why wouldn't an advertiser and a network use it at the same time as their first party? Because first party tracking in Safari at the moment, actually that's not going to be the right answer, but if in Chrome, if someone declines first party tracking, third party will still track, and therefore it's allowing things to track that wouldn't otherwise track. So different networks have other methods of tracking as well as the first party cookie. So, there is some tracking by codes. There is sometimes advertisers take things offline to track. So you just use whatever means possible to track, and the networks dedupe the method. So if a network heard that a sale had happened by 3 different ways, you only see that once in your interface, and it's appeared in the interface. So that's good news. So that's why you'd use multiple methods.
Yeah, I suppose I can just give you another kind of tangible example as well. If a brand has multiple ways of going through the purchase journey, maybe through an app or through a browser, their app purchase journey might be set up with, let's say, first party cookies, but their browser may not be, or if they're using, if it's a global campaign, or if it's, they've got B2C and B2B. We work with a lot of brands that are global enterprise brands that have lots of different campaigns, and so some of them may be on first party and some of them may be on third party approaches. And as Steve said, even if something is on first party, sometimes it falls back to third party. So is that nuance as well there. I think we've got time for one more question, and I'll take this from the Q&A as well. And this is directed to you, Steve. So what conversations have you had with brands or partners that you work with to ensure that each side is doing their part in garnering the most accurate data, and how can they improve their attractiveness to publishers?
So it comes back to talking about tracking. So, Sam's a great example there. He's proud talking about the tracking of his business. And I think it's, if you're an affiliate manager at a brand, talk to your developers, talk to your network, and then you can have really informed conversations with your publishers. And you can go to them and say, I've got this offer. I know it will track. So that's a really valuable offer for you to run. And that's the conversation that we start to have with brands, is the benefit of good tracking, and that there'll be brands who struggle to promote their program, perhaps because they've got a depressed EPC, and that might be depressed because it's not tracking properly. Fix your tracking, the EPC goes up, and therefore the campaign is easier to promote. So a program that zings with good tracking, good offers, good communication, prompt payment, no disputes around reversals, tracking is just one of the bases that needs to be run well for a campaign to zing. And they're the conversations we have with brands is, tracking is one component and work on it.
Great. Thank you so much. I think we're out of time now. Thanks for your questions. They were super kind of interesting. Thanks so much to Steve and Sam for joining me, and thanks everyone for coming to this webinar and listening. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.